How many of you are normal Muslims? You're not extremists, you're not radical, this is normal Sunni Muslims. Please raise your hands. Everybody, mashallah, subhanallah. Okay, take down your hands again. How many of you agree that the punishments described in the Quran and the Sunnah, whether it is death, whether it is stoning for adultery, whatever it is, if it is from Allah and His Messenger, that is the best punishment ever possible for humankind, and that is what we should apply in the world. Who agrees with that? Allahu Akbar. Are you all radical extremists? Subhanallah.
Islam is, when you enter the world of Islam, you enter a world in which everything has two meanings and everything is upside down. And everything you think you know, it's the opposite of that. It's like Islam is permanent opposite day.
One day, we're going to wake up and Dearborn, Michigan's going to say, hey, we're no longer a part of the United States. We are an Islamic caliphate.
It's going to be like a mass seeding of Islam throughout America.
Europe might be lost because of their tolerance.
It's about survival of Western civilization and Christianity and basic Renaissance ideas of the Enlightenment. The Christianity allowed to come forth. That's under attack by totalitarians on the left, radical Islam, which is Orthodox Islam, and other criminal movements. They are allied together in their predatory hatred of free will, of open, free societies. They are what we call evil. And it does exist, and it's moving against the world right now.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks?
It seems barely a day passes now without some big-name person warning of imminent collapse. The latest is Alan Greenspan. In an interview on Thursday, he told Fox News that Venezuela is now under martial law and that America is next. He said that what was happening in Venezuela was inevitably going to take place in the U.S.
Let me ask you about what's going on in Venezuela, Doctor. I mean, you've seen these protests, riots. There's video that we got to Fox that showed people collecting and eating out of garbage cans. A lot of folks have looked at that and said, you know, that could happen here. It could get off the wheels fast here. What do you think?
Well, I think on the way there, we basically go through Greece.
We've now had George Soros, Carl Icahn, Stanley Druckenmiller, Jim Rogers, the IMF, and the World Bank warn that we are on the verge of a crisis of biblical proportions. Greenspan even said that what is happening in Venezuela, complete with martial law, will come to the U.S. At what point do you start to listen and begin to protect yourself? Greenspan wants to blame the West's industrial slump on a lack of productivity and growth. This is propaganda, and he knows it. And if he doesn't know it, then he's drank too much Keynesian Kool-Aid. The main cause of ruin over time is central bank money debasement, not some mysterious missing growth. And government generally makes things worse via regulations, taxation, and debt. Greenspan should know this. He's not a stupid man. But Greenspan is part of the central banking clique. He does what he's told to do. And he's obviously supposed to make sure that people don't blame central banking, regulations, and other government activities for the perma-depression that is now taking place in Venezuela, Latin America, Asia, China, and the West. There is, in fact, worse to come, as we have often pointed out. This year is a building year for world government. The European Union, for instance, is creating a pan-European army and is also giving all European residents tax ID numbers. And China is adding the yuan to the International Monetary Fund's SDR currency basket on October 1st. Things aren't going to get any better in 2016, only worse. The idea is obviously to create convulsive economic chaos that will help usher in a new economic order. In the meantime, Greenspan is supposed to distract your attention. I went to Venezuela recently, as you probably know, and predicted just what Greenspan is talking about. But unlike Greenspan, I blame the problems that Venezuela is having on an oppressive government and destructive central bank policies. That's obvious to anyone who looks at Venezuela without an agenda. But Greenspan and his crowd have an agenda. They want globalism, and they want it soon. And they will mislead, cheat, and destroy to get what they want.
Rob Dew with Infowars.com, and we are out front of where the Bilderberg 2016 meeting will be taking place at the Taschenberg Palais. And I'm here with Tony Gosling, 20-year investigator of Bilderberg, also of the 7/7 London bombings.
These guys control most of the money in the Western world. I think that's pretty clear, particularly the financial criminals, the banksters. And we're looking at the potential for a massive economic crash. In 2008, people talk about it as a crash. It wasn't a crash, it was a bailout. But if there was a need for another one, which it looks like there may well be soon, the banks don't have the resources. Nobody has the resources to refinance those banks again. So it could be a catastrophic crash. Now, people like my father, for example, will say, well, no one wants a crash. No one wants a war. Actually, some people, like some of the people in here, they can bet on which way the market's going to go now using derivatives and things like this, and they can make a lot of money out of a crash. They can clean up a lot of things, distressed assets, that kind of thing. So they will be looking possibly at making money from such a thing, which is a crazy situation for the world to be in now. Also things like commodity prices, grain prices. Cargill is now merged. You've got these massive food companies from around the world controlling the markets, total monopolies. This goes right back to the oil monopoly of the Rockefeller family, this kind of attitude where there's no fair competition, we control the market, it's all a cartel. And they know, but by controlling the financial system, that they can control the outcome of a crash, and they can clean up on the rest of us. In the background, we've got all the tech companies. LinkedIn are inside here. Previously, we've had Google. We've had, who else?
Eric Schmidt's on the list.
Yeah, well, he's on the steering committee now, isn't he? Along with the former boss of MI6 now at Christmas time. That's another thing. The Bilderberg say they only have one meeting. Well, they had a meeting at Christmas. They put Google, Eric Schmidt on the steering committee, and they put John Soros from MI6 on the steering committee at Christmas. Maybe that was just a decision they made a long time ago. I don't think so. They do have other meetings outside here. So, you know, that's what we're dealing with, is a Snowden type situation. Remember, Snowden has backed up with facts what many of us have suspected for a long time, that these tech companies, and I would advise some of your listeners, get off the internet, stay off the internet, because they're using the internet to gather information on all of us, political activists, possibly to take down in the future. There's a very good book by Edwin Black, a Jewish American author, the IBM and the Holocaust, and it looked at the way that the Nazis for years were gathering information on people. Nobody knew why. And then they found out, because they were going around to Jewish houses, grabbing Jewish people from properties here in Germany and arresting them and putting them in concentration camps. And we've got to be very careful about the information we share with the authorities for that exact reason.
When Hitler came to power in 1933, his goal was to dismantle and destroy the Jewish community. This was an enterprise so fast that it required the resources of a computer. But in 1933, there was no computer. What there was the IBM punch card system, which controlled and stored information based upon the holes that were punched in various rows and columns. Naturally, there was no off-the-shelf software as there is today. Each application was custom designed, and an engineer had to personally configure it. Millions of people of all religions and nationalities and characteristics went through the concentration camp system. That's an extraordinary traffic management program that required an IBM system in every railroad direction and an IBM system in every concentration camp. Now, this is a typical prisoner card. There are little boxes where all the information is to be punched in. We compare this information to the code sheet for concentration camps. And here you see Auschwitz is 1, Buchenwald 2, Dachau is 3. Now, what kinds of prisoners were they? They could be a Jehovah's Witness for 2, a homosexual for 3, communist for 6, or a Jew would be 8. Now, what was their status? 1 was released, 2 was transferred, 4 was executed, 5 was suicide, and 6. Code 6. Sonderbehandlung, Special treatment meant the gas chamber or sometimes a bullet. They would punch that number in, the material was tabulated, the machines were set, and of course the punch cards, by the millions, had to be printed, and they were printed exclusively by IBM, and the profits were recovered just after the war. IBM would, of course, say that it had no control over its German subsidiary, but here on October 9th of 1941, a letter is being written directly to Thomas J. Watson with all sorts of detail about the activities of the German subsidiary. None of these machines were sold. They were all leased by IBM, and they had to be serviced on site once a month, even if that was at a concentration camp such as Dachau Buchenwald. This is a typical contract with IBM and the Third Reich, which was instituted in 1942. It's not with the Dutch subsidiary, it's not with the German subsidiary, it is with the IBM Corporation in New York.
Tony, earlier you told me these are the people that killed JFK. Why don't you expound on that a little bit?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that there are three major agencies involved in the death of John F. Kennedy. One is the CIA, Dulles and his people. The other is the FBI, and the other, of course, was Lyndon Johnson, who stood to gain quite a lot from it. He also started private arms company, Teammate Plus, I think it's called. You can look this stuff up, but eventually it's become Kellogg Brown Root, which is one of the biggest. What do they call it? Disaster capitalism, vulture companies that makes money from rebuilding smashed, destroyed entire countries, cities, that kind of thing. So those three together, essentially, what they've done is they've created a horrific kind of crime culture at the top in the United States. And Bilderberg was created by the same kind of people. Basically, the CIA, it's quite clear now, funded the European movement, which Bilderberg was part of, the attempt to federalize the whole of Europe. Basically, the Americans didn't like having to deal with 30 different embassies. You can understand this, can't you? Trying to get 30 different countries all to agree to what you want them to do is quite difficult. But if you can manage to federate the entire continent, 500 million people, then you only have one embassy to deal with. And that's why I make the connection between the CIA, the people that actually make money out of war. A lot of them were, like Dulles, were very closely connected with Nazi war criminals that had come over to the United States after World War II. And these are it's a kind of criminal syndicate we're dealing with here, who make money from war. So that's the guys who we've got inside here, and no wonder they want to keep it all secret, eh? Yeah, and they'll be looking. This is another thing. Is Andreas von Bülow is a German ex-politician. He was under Helmut Schmidt. He was a defense minister here in Germany, and he said some really good stuff in the run-up to this conference. He explained what the conference is really about, and it's great to hear it from a senior politician, former politician in Germany. He said what goes on here is they're listening for everything the people are saying. If they say one thing against the Pentagon policy, one thing against the Russia sanctions, then their name will be marked down and they will be removed. One way or another, they're going to be gone.
Anyway, this is Rob Dew signing off for Infowars.com.
I mean, look at Venezuela right now, a total hellhole.
Look, they are feeling the burn big time over there in Venezuela. These countries that really have had it, where you got free health care in Venezuela, you got free education, free college, just like Bernie Sanders wants. Everything is free except there's nothing available, right? You can get anything you want for free except you can't get anything.
Right, doctors are free, but you can't get in to see one to get aspirin, and you're right.
This is Gradowski of WeAreChange.org here in the barrios of Caracas, Venezuela, one of the top murder capitals of the world. What am I doing here? I'm crazy. As a journalist, I try to give you stories that all the other journalists are afraid to show you. I want to show you the raw truths of exactly what's happening in this world, but I think I did too much coming here to Venezuela. I'm joined by another crazy man, the one and only Jeff Berwick of the Dollar Vigilante. And the things that we have experienced, the things that we have seen here in Venezuela are absolutely insane. Jeff, just go off some of the things we saw here.
Well, I think just coming out of the airport and being told by, we actually were met by some people that we knew, and them telling us that this is the most dangerous area, is just walking out of the airport. And then we found out after we left that just a few hours earlier, a man was killed. They attempted to rob or kidnap him, and then he was killed. That was just our initial. Of course, we had to change money inside the airport because to get the amount of hyperinflation here is actually just unbelievable. You need a backpack full of money to buy a dinner. And then once we got into town, it was just crazy story after crazy story of, and we're just seeing the lineups. This is a true country in collapse. This is a hyperinflation and socialism reaching its ultimate end.
This is a true economic Armageddon. Venezuela is in a state of emergency right now. Its currency has been devalued 92% since the last 2 years alone. And the things we have been experiencing here, I mean, I grew up in Brooklyn in the 90s. I saw people shot, I saw people stabbed, my friends got killed. I went through all that, but what I've experienced here is far more than I thought I would ever see anywhere in the world. And it's like the criminality is brought on by the government as a way to control the people. Like, we were driving by and our fixer showed us this huge building. And he was like, yeah, this is a building, a skyscraper, that's being run by a criminal organization. There's people squatting in there, and this is where all the kidnapping happens. But you walk around town, and there's government mandated signs saying gun-free zones everywhere you go, and no smoking signs. While there's massive, incredible crime, our fixer lost 2 of his best friends who were murdered on 2 separate incidences just 6 months ago alone. I mean, we were out just walking around last night. Just tell us, like, what was like that experience for you?
It's the first time I've really seen anything like this. It's truly reaching the end of the socialism here, reaching its ultimate end that socialism always ends in. It's also reaching just the end of the currency, the hyperinflation, and I've heard it's hundreds of % a month right now. And we went to some of the restaurants, and all the prices on the menu are in paper, and they like taped onto the menu because they have to change it every week, and sometimes even more than that. It's changing that fast. It's really like, it's interesting, and you brought up the gun-free zones. That's the most interesting part to me, is no one is allowed to have a gun, and this is the murder capital of the world. So we walk into the hotel at night because we're a little crazy. We're told by everyone, don't go out, and we went out. There was no one anywhere. It was like a ghost town. And when we get back, the security guard is hiding behind a door because he doesn't have a gun, and the bad people all have guns.
Yeah, security guards are not allowed to have guns here. There's gun-free zones everywhere, and criminality and murder and kidnapping is at a level that is extremely shocking. Our fixer has a huge medical kit with him in case me and Jeff get stabbed or shot here. We have tinted out windows so no one sees who we are. We always got to lock the door. Last night we were walking with a mutual Tinder match that we had, and we were walking just from a car to another secure kind of castle club area behind. And as we're walking, she just sees a regular guy, and she's like, and she's running, and we're like, whoa, what? Like, I'm just like mentally getting prepared for anything to happen, and it's just another guy walking down the street. We're driving around, and it's totally, completely locked down. I mean, you're going to see some more footage on this YouTube channel as well as Jeff's YouTube channel. But like, no one out on the streets at all. I saw this one crazy 6'5", 350-pound dude who had his hands taped, and he was just clenching his knuckles. Just one dude, and it was just like a scene out of The Purge, Anarchy, and it was literally like we're being like transported around. Like, okay, let's go quickly, here. Security guards everywhere. But of course, as you said, we're walking in the hotel room. The people working in the hotel are like in past 3 doors, right, through like a little doorway looking when we came in, and they barricaded the doors with the luggage carriers because like they're even afraid.
That would stop anyone. So those luggage carriers that the valets have, they just put them all in front of the doors. Like, that should do it.
Yeah. We walked in, and they're like, just shockingly looked at us, and then like quickly went back to their business. But they were behind like 3 other doors that they could easily lock and protect themselves in, which kind of gives me the idea that the government here kind of uses this criminality, uses this violence as a way to control the people. So people think we need more police, we need more government, and the criminals here are running around just doing whatever they want, kidnapping whoever they want, murdering whoever they want with pure impunity. Meanwhile, the government sends in their agents to every business, to every private place, to every public park, to make sure that everyone has mandated signs that say no smoking, no guns, and you can't be racist. With 50 permits that a restaurant has to have, and they're spending their resources here in Venezuela to making sure that everything is socially acceptable, that people are not violating the gun-free zones, which are insane. I mean, talk about more about this kind of state that the people here in Venezuela, because we've seen everything here.
Yeah, when you talk about the state of the people, it's just, you can just really see it, how it permeates in the whole culture. No one looks each other in the eye. No one's friendly. Even the waiter at a restaurant, and I don't know if that's cultural or not, but they're just not friendly at all. It's just, everyone is really in a bad mood here. You brought up the movie The Purge, Anarchy. I hate that title because true anarchy is just without a government, and we would have a much more peaceful and prosperous world. Really what it should be called is the purge statism at its worst, turned off at the worst moment. And that's sort of what we're seeing here. And in actuality, for all those people who like Bernie Sanders as a one example, this is what he talks about. He talks about this is his country. This should be like the perfect place to show what he wants, because he wants extreme socialism. That's what they have here, and has caused so much poverty. We're sitting here in the barrios right now. He wants guns to be taken away. They've done that. How did that work out? And you can even just look at Chicago with their gun-free zones to see how that works out. And he wants to actually take control of the money supply and probably print a lot more money, and that'll turn into hyperinflation, which they have here. So this really is not that much different than what he's talking about. And I'm an anarchist, so I don't want, I'm not saying Donald Trump's going to be better, but for those people who do like Bernie Sanders, come to Venezuela, check it out. It's great.
Yeah, so social planning at its best, with lines down the block for just basic necessities, line down the blocks for public transportation that is insufficient, you know. And then a lot of people talk about the toilet paper, with the government setting up a set price so poor people could afford toilet paper. There's no toilet paper in different stores. We were, you know, obviously we didn't face that same amount of suffering as the average people here do, but we're trying to experience it as best as we can by giving you a full, raw, uncensored picture of everything that we are experiencing here. And it's also fair to mention that, you know, Venezuela is a petro state. The United States and Saudi Arabia, overproducing oil, are now also destroying this economy. It's also fair to say that the United States sanctions here have not helped. It's also fair to say that with everything that has been happening with the U.S. aid also funding the groups here has not helped in any way, shape, or form. But overall, from my experiences here, this government here is run by criminals. This is a criminal state run by a few people, total mafia, and I mean, what else could we say? One other topic I wanted to bring up with Jeff is specifically, he has a new video out that's getting a lot of hits on the internet, specifically dealing with the economic forecast of the United States. We could only pray that it doesn't get as bad as it is here in the United States. But just tell us about your new video. What are your predictions, and how has this kind of experience kind of added to the wealth of information that you do provide?
Well, you brought up a great point that the problems here aren't solely just caused by things here in the country. A lot of them are. I'd say a good 80% are, but a lot of it is the world controllers, the financial elites, and we were at Bilderberg last year. They are planning a massive collapse of the entire global economy. I just put out a video on it. It's going really viral right now. Everyone should check it out. But I'm expecting complete chaos, collapse, and crisis this year to happen this year, by October of this year. And a lot of people might say I'm crazy, but you know, Luke, and we've been to Bilderberg and all these things, there are people controlling these things. They do want certain things to happen, and I say in the video that it's likely that they want to cause complete economic collapse, a lot like here in Venezuela. This might even be a test case, and then to bring in a new, bring in essentially what they have here in Venezuela all over the world: more gun laws, more rules, more regulations, military, martial law, all those sort of things, capital controls, travel controls, and then bring in a new one world government, one world currency by 2018 is my best guess.
Jeff, thank you so much for your wealth of information. We're seeing everything happen here on the front lines with the suitcases of money that you need just to buy basic necessities. As we know, after the 2008 financial crisis, it was never fixed. It was just paid over with more lies. It's only a matter of time. The United States keeps printing and inflating the currency as well. It's only a matter of time for the truth to come out, and you need to be prepared and you need to be smart. We've taken a lot of precautions to make sure we are safe. Nothing has yet happened to us. Stay tuned here on the front lines, reporting from Venezuela, where the United States has just deemed just a year ago a terrorist state. Here on the front lines, this is Jeff Berwick and Luke Rudowski.
It came out of one of the Bilderberg meetings that Venezuela was going to be targeted. And this exact scenario was going to unfold. And here we see it.
Global leaders are panicking as the economic collapse erupts on a planetary scale. According to Michael Snyder for the Economic Collapse blog, he's reporting that the mainstream news outlets are already starting to use the phrase economic collapse to describe what is going on in some areas of our world right now. He writes that for many Americans this may seem a bit strange, but the truth is that the worldwide economic slowdown that began during the second half of last year is starting to get a lot worse. Now, in the article that he's written, he examines the evidence of this economic slowdown and the acceleration, basically, of it from South America, Europe, Asia, and North America. And he says that, basically, once you complete reading this whole article, it'll be absolutely obvious the direction of the global economy. Now, if you also want to take a look at some stuff, we've got some interviews from Peter Schiff we just recently published as well. But Snyder says here that the warnings of so many prominent experts are now becoming a reality, and what we have witnessed so far are just the early chapters of a crushing economic crisis that will affect every man, woman, and child in the entire world. My friends, we did a report last week regarding the Chase bank run in, I think it was Kenya. Now, a simple Twitter storm erupted and triggered a bank run that caused that bank, that Chase Bank there in Kenya, to go into receivership. So that shows you just how unstable the world economy is. Well, it looks like a Twitter post has triggered a Chase bank run. Yes, Eric Umbach for the Bloomberg News is reporting that Kenyans on Twitter are being blamed for a run on deposits that resulted in Chase Bank Kenya Limited being placed under creditor protection by the East African country's regulators on Thursday. The Central Bank of Kenya Governor Patrick Njoroge said that malicious comments on social networks, including WhatsApp Incorporated, were part of the reason that the lender was placed under receivership. Quote, "We had some individuals that shouted fire in a crowded theater. To me, there is nothing as reckless as that," he told reporters in the capital of Nairobi. Quote, "If one made such horrendous statements, you can cause a run, some crisis. Indeed, the bank was under serious pressure." According to Chase Bank, they said on Wednesday they sought to assure customers it was operating normally as a flurry of comments on social media sites speculated on the financial health of the company. Well, it's not just that. I mean, here in the United States, new ATMs permitted individuals to do massive withdrawals because the new ATMs now allowed for $100 bills. There was one report of one individual withdrawing $20,000. So now Chase had to put capital controls on those ATMs and to limit them to $1,000. So that was another run. So that's possible that that story carried over into Kenya, and then of course you had the bank runs there. So, but it doesn't combine all that with the global economic instability. I mean, think about it. Like this world is on a hair trigger right now. So anything could trigger a massive financial collapse. And it could start in Kenya, it could steamroll into the rest of the world. I mean, it's just like a domino effect. I'm Gary Franchi, and you're watching the Next News Network.
It was, 3 or 4 months ago that the Royal Bank of Scotland came out and said, sell everything paper. Run for the hills. And now we see Saudi Arabia say they're going to pay folks with IOUs and borrowing $10 million a week. I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on. And I know we're kind of the last to know here, but they're admitting the world's going into a depression. We're going to talk to Peter Schiff, who's accurately predicted it all, and that gold would go up. What I'm getting at is this. Paper is being absolutely devalued everywhere, but they say get more into paper. And all I know is you're crazy if you're not partially into something else, farmland, gold, equipment, whatever. I mean, it's just a really creepy feeling. Like every moment I'm sitting here on air, I'm not doing my family a justice. I should be getting ready. And I've never had a fire under like this. I've never had such just gut level concern because I look at hundreds of news articles a day. We're going to talk to Peter about just how bad it is, how bad it's going to get, and what some of these warning signs are here in just a moment. Now joining us is Peter Schiff for the balance of the hour. Europac.com. Peter Schiff has billions under management. His father recently passed. Irwin Schiff was one of the top patriots in the country, going back even predating Ron Paul. It's just good to see how it runs in the family. And he has been accurately predicting what's happening in the economy now. And he's been accurately predicting that gold would go up, which it's been doing, despite the fact they're trying to suppress it. And so I want to get from him just how dire the straits are. Why are the elites running to the Cook Islands? Why are they running to New Zealand? Why are they buying armored redoubts? Why are the Saudis paying folks in IOUs? What in Hades is going on? Peter Schiff, thanks for coming on with us.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Alex.
You're dead on. I think you're probably the most accurate guy out there of everybody we interview. So let me ask you this then. Why is the media right that we're finally in big financial problems? How bad is it globally? You've got all this default stuff in places like Puerto Rico. Now they have a deal with Congress. You got all this bail-ins more in Europe. You've got all these pension funds going belly up. You've got the Saudis can't pay their bills. I mean, what is going on?
Well, I don't think the media is coming close to acknowledging how bad the economy actually is. I mean, I think if you just look at how popular Bernie Sanders is and Donald Trump, that's a good indication of how bad the economy is, because both the left and the right know how bad it is. And so they're both grasping for straws, looking for something different. But, you know, you mentioned Puerto Rico. And the interesting thing about Puerto Rico is broke. I mean, that's pretty obvious. Even the governor admits that mathematically, you know, they can't pay their debts. But 3 years ago, they were just as broke. It's just that nobody cared because creditors weren't worried. They just kept lending them money even though they were broke and interest rates were down.
So it's a cold sore. It's a canary in the coal mine. The fact that that's happening shows other big creditors are now overextended.
Well, it just shows you that, you know, it's all a question of it's never a problem until it is, right? So Puerto Rico was broke, but now it's a problem because the creditors figured out that they're broke. Well, America is more broke than Puerto Rico.
Sure.
That's a fact. It's just that our creditors haven't figured it out yet. But when they do, then Donald Trump is going to end up being right because all we can do is default. And if we don't default, if we print money, which now Trump is saying, oh, we don't have to default because we could print. Well, printing is worse than default because printing doesn't just wipe out the bondholders. It wipes out anybody who owns U.S. dollars. Because it'll be obvious when this thing falls apart. It'll have to be obvious to everybody, even the left, that the government is responsible, because we have so many government programs and so many people from the government who have made all kinds of empty promises that are going to turn out to be completely false. So hopefully the American public can get back to our roots, because if we can embrace those free market principles, there's no limit to what we can accomplish.
That's what produced all the choices. It's a no-brainer, and you're right. For probably 70 years, we haven't had much of a free market. We never had a total free market, but as we get more and more towards command and control, we see the prosperity dissipate. So you're right. The answer is expose the fact that this system is crony capitalism at the top, socialism at the bottom. I mean, look at Venezuela right now, a total hellhole.
Look, they are feeling the burn big time over there in Venezuela. And I know the people that, you know, they talk about democratic socialism and you bring up Venezuela like they say, well, we didn't mean that kind. We mean like the Swedish kind. Look, you know, the reason that Sweden is still wealthy is because before Sweden adopted those socialist type programs, they were a very wealthy economy. They didn't have these programs until they were rich. And then because they implemented these programs, they're less rich. And now they're trying to dial it back. But, you know, these countries that really have had it where, you know, you got free health care in Venezuela, you got free education, free college, you know, just like Bernie Sanders want. Everything is free, except there's nothing available, right? You can get anything you want for free, except you can't get anything.
Right, doctors are free, but you can't get in to see one to get aspirin. And you're right. Sweden, under free market, built an incredible infrastructure. And now, like dumb heathens, people are living in the infrastructure built by the last generations,
Yes,
even though
and
that's starting to crumble now.
Yeah, well, and the Swedes already recognize the mistakes of the welfare state and how it has corrupted younger Swedes and how they live in these social safety nets. And so there is a big movement to try to move in the other direction. But you can't be socialist unless you first become rich through capitalism. Then you can squander your wealth. But the countries that are poor have gone from one dictator to another, and they've never had freedom.
Rich countries slit their wrists with the socialist razor blade later. Peter Schiff, you're absolutely right, but you've got to be capitalist to be able to put on the dog and pony show of socialism. Europac.com. Have a great weekend. Thank you so much, sir, for your insight.
A bubble emerges and grows on low interest rates. Investors and speculators are down in, as the experts say. Everything is fine and growth will continue. The Fed raises interest rates in a time where the economy begins to slow down. And that specific time is right before the next presidential election. The bubble bursts, and the next president has to deal with the aftermath. If this sounds crazy to you right now, let's put the theory to the test.
I do believe in the American dream. I believe there is such a thing as the American dream. Owning a home is a part of that dream. It just is. Right here in America, if you own your own home, you're realizing the American dream.
The asset this time was houses. The Federal Reserve had cut interest rates from 6% in 2001 to 1% in 2003. Rock-bottom interest rates created a huge demand for mortgages, as they were cheaper to pay off. Everybody wanted a house, and that pushed prices up. You could get rich just by becoming a homeowner, as the price kept going up. Soon, even people who could not afford to make a down payment or could not provide proof of a steady income and collateral were given loans to purchase new homes. If these people defaulted on their payments, the bankers didn't care. They would be left with a house, an asset that was rising in price. These no down payment, no collateral mortgage loans, called subprime mortgages, were given to millions of low-income families.
And one of the barriers to homeownership is the inability to make a down payment. And if one of the goals is to increase homeownership, it makes sense to help people pay that down payment.
Now, the bankers had a brilliant idea. Bundle up the normal mortgages with the subprime ones and sell them to other banks, pension funds, hedge funds, and sovereign funds. Mortgage payments generated huge profits, and demand was high for this new type of speculative contract, now called collateralized debt obligations, or CDOs. This created the housing bubble.
Ben, there's been a lot of talk about a housing bubble, particularly, from the Fed, from all sorts of different places. Can you give us your view as to whether or not there is a housing bubble out there?
Well, unquestionably, housing prices are up quite a bit. I think it's important to note that fundamentals are also very strong. We've got a growing economy, jobs, incomes. We've got very low mortgage rates.
The experts appeared all over mainstream news, assuring everyone that housing was not a bubble.
Wealth has risen dramatically. The United States economy has never been better shape. There is no tax increase coming in the next couple of years. Monetary policy is spectacular.
The Federal Reserve now started to increase interest rates. By 2007, the interest rates had reached 5.25%, and many families with subprime mortgages could not afford to make the monthly payments, and their homes were foreclosed. As more and more houses went up for sale, the prices started dropping. Consumption plummeted. A new crisis had begun, and it would reach its peak in fall 2008, right before the elections. House prices tanked. Banks and other investment funds found that their bulletproof, high-profit CDOs became worthless. No one wanted to buy CDOs or houses anymore. It was a financial bloodbath. The banking giant Lehman Brothers had bet on mortgages and was left holding assets nobody wanted anymore. On the 15th of September, it filed for bankruptcy. So how does our theory stand? We had a new housing and subprime mortgage bubble created by low interest rates. Many Americans thought housing was a secure investment. The banks gambled huge sums of money on CDOs. The experts, again, said everything was fine. The economy started to weaken in late 2007 as the Fed was increasing the interest rates. The bubble violently burst just as Americans were preparing to vote for the 44th President of the United States. Everything that happened in 2000 happened again in 2008. The bubble burst in the year of the elections. Only this time, it was bigger, and the damage was global and massive. The theory is proven correct again. There's an election coming this November. Will there be another economic crisis? Following our checklist, we have an election year, the Fed raising interest rates, an economy slowing down, experts saying everything is fine. The only thing that's missing is the bubble that Trump warned will burst before the November elections. Does he know something we don't?
The word bubble, remember the word bubble. You heard it here first. I mean, I don't want to sound rude, but I hope if it explodes, it's going to be now rather than 2 months into another administration.
My prediction for 2016 is that we will see a banking collapse that will make the 2008 crisis look like a Sunday afternoon picnic. This coming crash will wipe out the entire U.S. financial sector and take with it savings, deposits, retirement funds, pensions. It'll be nothing short of a financial bloodbath. How can this be possible? Well, remember how bubbles are created when something seems to grow indefinitely? The delusion is that something is too big to fail. But the bigger the bubble becomes, the faster it fails. Right now, people think big banks can't fail because of their size and importance in the world economy. It is as blatant as their name suggests. How did we get here? On September 18, 2008, Hank Paulson, the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, told members of Congress that $5.5 trillion in wealth would disappear by 2 p.m. that day unless the government took immediate action. What took place next was undoubtedly the biggest blackmail in history. The threat, keep the big banks alive, or else the economy implodes and depositors lose their money. In December 2008, the first of many financial stability measures was put into place. The Fed's mission from now on was to keep the big banks alive no matter what. Economists calculated that the total cost of the various measures put into place to accommodate big banks was in excess of $20 trillion up to this year. The too big to fail banks now had a taxpayer-sponsored safety net. The message was clear. Do whatever risky business you want. We've got your back. And this is how Congress and the Federal Reserve created the ultimate bubble, the too big to fail bubble. The idea that the too big to fails were going to get cut down to size after the financial crisis has turned into a giant myth. In fact, they've become even bigger. Unfortunately, the old saying, the bigger they are, the harder they fall, will prove correct. And when they collapse, the result will be nothing short of catastrophic for the world economy. But for a bubble to inflate, you also need an asset on which speculation, or rather gambling, has become so rampant and so over the top that a disaster is just waiting to happen. Let me introduce you to the world's biggest and most dangerous casino. It's called the derivatives market. And right now, the total net worth of all outstanding derivatives contracts is a staggering $552.9 trillion, according to the Bank for International Settlements. $552.9 trillion. Let that number sink in for a moment. Total U.S. debt right now stands close to $19 trillion, and most Americans find that shocking. But very few have any idea of how big this financial market is. The entire economy of the world, in real goods and services, is evaluated at around $78 trillion annually. The derivative market is 7 times the value of every good and every service provided around the world in an entire year. At first, I thought this number was too big to be real. But the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, independent bureau of the U.S. Department of the Treasury, confirms it. Make no mistake, you are looking at the biggest bubble in the history of mankind, something 7 times greater than the entire economy of the world. So what exactly is a derivative? A derivative is a speculative contract, a bet placed on stocks, mortgages, interest rates, the price of commodities like gold, silver, coffee, oil, or the possibility of a company or even a nation to default. Basically, right now, there is nothing of economic worth that does not have some sort of derivative attached to it. All derivatives are bets. This is not a metaphor. an analogy, or a generalization. The players on the derivative market gamble trillions on the future price of the asset to which the derivative is attached. These are the speculative contracts that will eventually pop the current gigantic bubble. Warren Buffett once referred to derivatives as financial weapons of mass destruction, and he was proven right. The CDOs that led to the crash of 2008 were derivatives, as they drew their value from interest payments on mortgages and housing prices. They were traded on this market just like all the other derivatives, and they were just a tiny part of the market. In 2008, there were about $500 billion worth of CDOs. That was only a very tiny fraction of the derivatives market, yet it was enough to almost collapse the economy of the world. Remember how I said that this is the world's largest casino? In a nutshell, the derivatives market, or more correctly put, the derivatives casino, is where big banks and other financial institutions place their bets on every aspect of the world economy. Yet with these bets, everybody loses. So how did this bubble inflate to more than $550 trillion? Say Jack controls the derivative department of one of the too-big-to-fail banks. He knows that the riskier the bet, the higher the profit he gets, and the bigger his bonus. And he thinks, just like everyone else, that if he loses, the Federal Reserve will bail him out just like in 2008. What do you think Jack would do? How much do you think Jack would bet on derivatives? Well, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency has the exact numbers. Citigroup, total assets more than $1.8 trillion. Total exposure to derivatives, more than $53 trillion. JP Morgan Chase, total assets about $2.4 trillion. Total exposure to derivatives, more than $51 trillion. Goldman Sachs, total assets, less than $1 trillion. Total exposure to derivatives, more than $51 trillion. Bank of America, total assets, a little bit more than $2.1 trillion. Total exposure to derivatives, more than $45 trillion. Morgan Stanley, total assets, less than $1 trillion. Total exposure to derivatives, more than $31 trillion. Overall, the biggest U.S. banks collectively have more than $247 trillion of exposure to derivatives contracts. This is an amount of money that is more than 13 times the size of the U.S. national debt. And it's a ticking time bomb that could set off financial Armageddon at any moment.
I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us, a best-selling author, a financial expert, a lawyer, a Wall Street insider, someone that the U.S. government has hired to play financial war games. I'm talking about the author of this brand new book, The New Case for Gold. If you can see at the bottom there, you can see it's James G. Rickards. He is a best-selling author of Currency Wars and this book, The Death of Money. He's probably going to go for the hat trick. It's very rare for a first-time author to have two best-selling books going on his third. James Rickards, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Greg, thanks for inviting me. It's great to be with you. Now, why do I say collapse? And I've also said, and it's very clear, and I think you can prove this scientifically, that the next collapse will be bigger than anything in history, at least maybe since, the end of the Bronze Age or the fall of the Roman Empire. There have been a couple of big collapses. 1,500 years apart in the last 3,000 years. But we don't have to hypothesize that. This will be bigger than anything that any of us can recall. Why do I say that? Because I use complexity theory. I use something called inverse probability-based theorem. I use behavioral psychology. These are the scientific methods. When I say scientific, I mean this is applied mathematics, experimental psychology, a branch of physics. This is hard science to understand capital markets. Versus the obsolete models that the Fed and other central bankers are using. They're using what they call stochastic general equilibrium models. It's almost like, the clock winds down, you crank it up, it gets back on time again. Something gets out of balance, you apply policy, you bring it back into balance. Or imagine a thermostat, your house is too warm, you turn it down, your house is too cool, you turn it up. Those are all examples of equilibrium systems. Capital markets are not equilibrium systems. They are complex systems. And so when you apply complexity theory, you learn a couple things. Number one, The worst thing that can happen, so this is the collapse we're talking about, is an exponential function of scale. When I say exponential, what I mean is it doesn't go up in a linear way. So let me give you a concrete example of that. So let's just take J.P. Morgan. Let's say from 2008 to 2018, let's say 10-year period, so a couple years out, you've tripled the balance sheet, hypothetically. So you go to Jamie Dimon, the CEO of J.P. Morgan, and you say, Mr. Dimon, you've tripled your balance sheet. How much did the risk go up? He would say very little, almost none. And the reason is, yeah, we tripled our balance sheet, but it's long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short. All those things net out. The actual net risk is quite small. We have it under control, so there's very little risk at all. If you call my 85-year-old mother, who's a brilliant woman, but not an economist, not a complexity theorist, and say, Mom, the bank tripled their balance sheet, how much did the risk go up? My mother would probably use intuition and say, well, if you tripled the balance sheet, you tripled the risk. Jamie Dimon's wrong and my mother's wrong. In a complex system, when you triple the size of the system, the risk increases exponentially. It could be 10 times, 50 times, 100 times. In other words, there's all this embedded risk. The risk in derivatives, the risk in a balance sheet is not in the net the way Jamie Dimon would have it. They call that value at risk. The risk is in the gross. If your counterpart's going bankrupt, you don't care what your net exposure on your total balance sheet is. You care about your gross exposure to that particular counterpart. That's why the Fed bailed out AIG in 2008, because they didn't really care about AIG, but they owe Goldman Sachs a lot of money, so they were indirectly bailing out Goldman Sachs. So just take everything I said. Now go back to 2008. What did we hear about over and over? Too big to fail, too big to fail, too big to fail. Guess what? Since 2008, the 5 largest banks in the United States are bigger. They have a larger percentage of the banking assets. The derivatives books are much bigger. So again, putting those facts and the science together, what we can see is that everything that was too big to fail in 2008 is bigger today. Risk is an exponential function of scale, which means the risk is much bigger. And just to top off, the icing on the cake, all the bailout measures that were used in 2008, the Fed printing $4 trillion, creating tens of trillions of dollars of swap lines, none of that policy has been reversed. The Fed still has the $4 trillion on their balance sheet. They still have the tens of trillions of swap lines in place. In other words, having used up all that dry powder to bail out banks the last time, they don't have any scope to do more. I mean, what's the Fed going to do next time? Go from 4 trillion to 8 trillion, 12 trillion? At that point, you're at the outer boundary of the confidence limit. So we have these things coming together. The system is larger. That means systemically it's exponentially more risky. The central banks don't have any dry powder, and it's just a matter of time before the collapse comes. They're going to do 2 things. You can already see this coming. The reliquification of the world, the money printing, is not going to come from the Fed. It's going to come from the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. They have the only clean balance sheet left in the world. They can print money too. They don't print dollars or euros. They print special drawing rights or SDRs. So they're going to flood the zone with trillions of SDRs, which will be highly inflationary. But the other thing that's going to happen, and again, you can see this coming, they're going to lock down the system. They're not going to bail out the banks. They're going to close the banks, close the exchanges, suspend redemptions in money market funds, reprogram ATMs so you can only get $300 in gas and groceries. It's going to look like Greece and Cyprus. By the way, last year the SEC changed the rules. For the first time, money market funds are allowed to suspend redemptions, which is exactly what hedge funds do in a crisis, but nobody ever thought you could apply that to money market funds, so they will. And they will. So the bottom line is the risk is exponentially greater. The central banks are out of dry powder. It's just a matter of time before the collapse is coming. Complexity theory tells us that. It'll be a bigger collapse than ever before. And the only rescue will come from the IMF, which will be inflationary, plus locking down the system, which means you won't be able to get your money. So my advice is get some gold now. Don't wait for the panic. Don't wait for the price spike, because you actually won't be able to get it when that buying panic kicks in. Get your gold now. Put it in a safe place. Gold is non-digital. Can't hack it. Can't erase it. Can't freeze it. So that'll get you through. That'll see you through the crisis. The beginning of the collapse will cause the lockdown. It's not that the lockdown will cause the collapse. The lockdown will be the consequence of the collapse.
James Rickards, thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thank you, Greg.
And Larry is on oxygen. He does have lung cancer. He doesn't like to talk about it. And he is the latter stage and is battling for his life just to stay alive to fight the globalists. He lost basically everything he had after he went up against the Clintons. He could have gone to Washington with them the whole 9 yards, so please keep him in your prayers. This guy has been resuscitated, you name it. He is a tough patriot. And he's in his final real mission for the Republic right now. In fact, Larry Nichols, we ought to have you on sometime just about your experience in the special forces back when they were really special, they're still amazing and see even more combat on average than what you guys saw. But you were actually in Africa and I guess in Latin America and all over, a lot of clandestine stuff before you got recruited over into the CIA's Dixie Mafia operation. But man, I tell you, am I right in saying you're really fighting for the Republic now more than ever? Isn't this the last 25 years your real mission, sir?
You know, Alex, this has been, and I'm sorry about the noise. I normally don't like to have the oxygen on when I do the interview, but
it's okay.
To this time.
It's okay, brother. There's no noise.
This has been, of all the places I've been, of all of the combat action I've been in, there's been nothing tougher than fighting the Clintons politically, fighting the establishment politically, because remember, Alex, you and I were fighting the establishment before it was cool. People didn't believe us, that it was all rigged. Well, now they see what we've been talking about. Let's just pray that it's not too late. That's all we can do.
Well, brother, you got the floor here. Let's. I throw out a lot of topics. You want to jump into one of those, or what's most important on your screen?
I heard the commercial coming on where you were talking about, getting prepared. Let me just throw this in right now. As you know, Alex, there are things I know about and I can't talk about because of contracts and such. But folks, you better get ready. Now, Alex, I don't know what you sell, but I hope but what is impending right now, what's coming right now, we are, well, I've always done this. See that distance right there between my thumb and forefinger? That's how close we are to this baby collapsing. You better be ready. And you better.
By the way, I've been interviewing you for 21 years. You're one of the first interviews I ever did on radio, Larry. And I've never heard you say collapse. I mean, you never got into economic stuff. I mean, what's going on?
Well, if you know what I unfortunately, maybe fortunately know, you'll see exactly what's coming. And that's why I tell people, Alex, tell you or ask you to tell your audience, read the signs. These things going on around the world. Remember, we're usually the last ones to know. But it's coming, and it's coming hard, and it's coming fast. I'll tell you one other thing. Folks, you're not getting anything on your money in the bank. We're in the middle, Alex. Even people in Washington, a couple of senators I know well that you know, have even told me, Nichols, you were right. We are in the beginning of the end of the soft coup. A silent coup, soft coup. That means our government's fixing to change. They're afraid it's fixing to change. Now, here's what happens when a country starts to change. First thing is you've got in the banking area, you've got nationalization. Guys, I've been in 4 countries. 2 of which I was a part of the thing that helped make them go into the coup. But I'm in 4 countries, and in each country, 3 things happened. First was the nationalization of the banks. That's going to come when the nasty secret from the major bank comes out. Now, I think if you look at Puerto Rico, imagine this, Alex. What if one of the 5 major banks in this nation held a disproportionate share of the 107 million, which is just the payment they defaulted on, of Puerto Rico's debt, and they belly up? Now think about that. So what happens when it gets that critical? The country, the government comes in and nationalizes the banks. You say, well, that can't happen. I'm sorry, didn't they just do that with health care? Our 5th largest thing in the country, they did it there. They come in, they nationalize the bank. Second thing is negative interest. Now, I hear people all the time saying, well, boy, I hope we get negative interest. My house payment will go down. No, negative interest does not mean your house payment's going to go down. Negative interest is a political term for once the banks are taken over by the government.
They're going to charge you to keep money in your bank and do bail-ins.
You got it.
And the bankers are going to give all themselves the stimulus money. It's absolute robbery.
The third thing is repatriation, Alex. Repatriation. That's when they take your money. That's when you go to the bank, as Brazil, as Greece, as Portugal, as several countries have done. You go to the bank to get your money out, and they say, I'm sorry, we just can't do it. You know, in Greece, they allow you today, still today, you can only take $37 a week out. I don't care if you got $1 million in. Those things are coming. So let me ask you this, Alex. I don't know. What do people make putting their money in a bank now? I mean, 1% maybe, or whatever, interest. I would get my money and get it to where I can see it, where I can hold it, because that's what's going to happen. You're going to have cash. And by the way, if you don't think you better get the foods and supplies today for the day this happens, has anybody been around, like in Arkansas, maybe Texas is the same way, Alex, when a snowstorm's coming? You know, you hear on the news and weather, a storm's coming. Go to the grocery store a little bit late, and you go to the aisles, and the aisles are stripped bare of bread and milk and such. Well, think about this. When this happens, it'll be amazing how fast the grocery store shelves will empty. So I suggest that you listen to me real tight. And you better understand, I don't bluff and I don't kid, especially about something like this. You better get the supplies you need. Now, I don't know if you sell them, Alex, or somebody else does. That's somebody else's business other than mine. But you better get them.
No, I hear you. I hear you. Well, Larry, you're about to leave us. I want to get you back up in the next few weeks. Overall, we've been praying for you. You look pretty good overall. I know you've been through a lot. Larry Nichols, God bless you. We'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Thank you, buddy. See ya. See you all.
Thank you, sir. What's coming next, Larry? And everything you just heard me say, is that wrong or is that right?
No, that's all right. Excuse the dog. Somebody's walking by. But let me say this. Executive Order 13391, I know you've reported on it. It is the National Patriots Defense of Liberty Enabler Act. That thing calls, Alex, that thing calls for federal territories to fall, all federal territories to fall under Agenda 21, number one. But here's the kicker. It also facilitates the president to bring in UN troops to this country. Now, guys, if you don't think we're close, remember what I told you, Alex, about Cuba?
It says it officially. It's been in the Washington Post. You said 6 months ago they were going to use Cuban troops as part of the invasion force because they can mix in and speak Spanish. I mean, if it was Chinese troops or Russian, folks would fight.
Listen, it is 6 hours. They can have 250,000 black hat troops in this country. I have fought them. They're formidable. They are. Now, add to that executive order, where did it come from? Where did it come from, Alex, out of the blue? Why would he do that? Then Obama normalizes relationship with Cuba. But here's the kicker. Why did he go to Cuba? I mean, go down there to watch a ball game? You see, there are plans that have to be made, I believe, towards the facilitation of bringing those troops into this country that he can't make out of the White House.
And I tell you, the left would worship that. They would love to see foreign troops kicking conservatives and veterans' guts out in the street. They just lust for our blood.
Well, I'm telling you, he's over there right now, I believe. I can't prove this in a court of law, but soon I will be able to.
I mean, the communists look like heaven has happened when he's over there.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, they're working out the fine details of this operation. Now, Obama is trying to turn us into an Islamic caliphate, this country. And if he can do that, then he becomes and will become the global leader of Islam globally.
Now, how high level, and specifically what are they saying about his plan to create a caliphate?
Well, it's some of the former top generals in the military who were riffed out because they were not going to go along with the sinister plan. Then I have 2 ambassadors that were involved, believe it or not, with the plan. And then when they found out the trueness of it, they didn't think it was real. They didn't think it was coming. They called me. And then, as you know, I got people on, or got a person, let's just say, on the Supreme Court. So I have pretty good, deep inside information. And about stuff like this, you would never want to speculate. And that's why I can tell you these things, and you see them. Look at him now. He's in Cuba for what? For what? To watch a ball game? No. Why would you, out of the blue, normalize relations with Cuba? What did we get out of it? Alex, that's what people got to ask. What did we get out of normalizing relationships with Cuba? Now, they get a lot. We don't get anything. Now, folks, if you want to shut down an executive order, let me tell you a secret. Congress has 30 days on any executive orders to rescind it. If Congress does not rescind that executive order in 30 days, Alex, it becomes a law. Just like if it went through the legal process of the House, the Senate vote, and President.
Same thing with signing statements. If they don't override that, it becomes a law.
That's right.
What about 5 million Islamists coming in from radical areas, over 1 million in the U.S.? They're keeping the number artificially low, but it's much higher than they're saying. I'd say 1 million. Clearly, is this a sleeper cell plan? Use the crisis.
Alex, they're coming in, and if you look at what the Obama people are telling these people when they come in, they're telling them not to assimilate. Obama's people are telling these Islamic people, don't assimilate into a society here. And he's setting it up to where they will keep their society. He's setting, what's going to happen when Dearborn, Michigan declares a caliphate? It's coming. Alex, that's coming. One day, we're going to wake up and Dearborn, Michigan's going to say, hey, we're no longer a part of the United States. We are an Islamic caliphate. What do you think anybody can do about it?
It's the perfect balkanization. They're really doing it. You can see it in Europe and the U.S. You criticize it, and then the police come arrest you. It's like, hey, they're God now. They're your masters now.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks?
Does it raise ethical questions about the use of government money to produce stories about the government that wind up being aired with no disclosure that they were produced by the government?
This would mean that the CIA could manipulate the news in the United States by channeling it through some foreign country.
At CBS, we had been contacted by the CIA. As a matter of fact, by the time I became the head of the whole news and public affairs operation in 1954, ships had been established, and I was told about them and asked if I'd carry on with them.
We need to do this every day of the week and just really brainwash people into thinking about guns in a vastly different way.
The biggest funders of media now are actually government scriptwriters, and the CIA meeting constantly with the top scriptwriters in Hollywood and in New York to sell the agenda.
Joining us now is George Washington, veteran of the French and Indian War, of course, commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. He made a bold, audacious move in crossing the Delaware. He ultimately defeated the world's largest military. And when it came time for the first president of the United States after we'd won our independence, there was nobody else that was even close to George Washington. Now, April the 19th. Tell us what happened in your time, April 19th.
It's interesting. There was a place called Lexington, and there was a man named Jonas Clark that stood in the way of the Redcoats. Didn't call them the British were coming. We were all British. But the Redcoats were coming, and they were in the lawn of the church there in Lexington where the road split. Now, you would think the parson of that church would be upset that the war, the shot heard around the world, took place in the backyard of his church, except that parson was Jonas Clark, the head of the militia.
Mm-hmm.
That shot heard around the world was due to the fact that those Redcoats were going to Concord. And I'm sure you know why they were going to Concord.
Yes.
To confiscate the arms and ammunition of the Patriot cause. And so the shot heard around the world was actually over gun control.
Yes.
We need to understand our history. We need to know where we have come from. I have been updated some by your staff, and I understand that there's been an attempt to stop the importation of assault rifles. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Things that would be used by the military.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would like to present you with one of those assault rifles that has been banned by the government, if you don't mind.
Yes, I'd love to have that.
This assault rifle was banned for importation in 1773 by the government because they wanted to control us, the people. And so I would like to present that to you.
Well, that's a nice piece.
To remind, again, a forgetful nation of the legacy of faith and freedom that has been left to us as a nation. And so that's why I have come. I've also understood that as they have updated me that there was a fiery explosion.
Yes.
As Muslim terrorists tried to interrupt our world trade just as a new president had taken office. Is that true?
We understand. We're still trying to get information about that, but that is something that we all know happened. We don't exactly know at this point. It's not been made public who was behind it, but yes, the Muslims were.
I can shed some light on that.
Okay.
That new president was Thomas Jefferson.
Oh.
The year was 1801, and that fiery explosion was the USS Intrepid in the harbor of Tripoli on September the 8th.
Oh. September the 8th.
We must know our history.
Yes.
We must know from whence we come. That was the first war that our young nation was in, and it was against Muslim terrorists.
Mm-hmm. Who were blackmailing the United States,
yes,
taking over ships.
We had no significant navy, and so they were actually taking Americans prisoner and making them slaves.
In my time, we have some Arabs who think that they can blackmail the United States with information about our own.
Nothing has changed.
That's right.
Nothing new under the sun.
That's right. Now, you are a large man. What, 6'2", 6'3"? Oh,
yeah. History says 6'2" to 6'4".
Yes, yes. And one of the best horsemen in the country, according to Thomas Jefferson.
Well, I am humbled by that title, yes, but I do enjoy my horses.
A man of great physical strength. Understand that you could
I am humbled.
Crack nuts with your bare hands.
If hungry enough, yes. Yes.
And you got fairly hungry at Valley Forge, didn't you?
Oh, yes. Those were some dark days, some very dark days.
Now, you talked about April 19th and the pastor who was head of the militia there.
Yes.
Tell us about that, because, you know, as we look at Romans 13, today in our time, we have a lot of people who will tell us that Romans 13 prohibits any questioning even of authority, that we should unquestionably obey authority. Yet, Romans 13 was used by the Black Regiment, as they call the clergy, to argue for the fact that we were justified to stand up to a king that was no longer under God, no longer under the rule of law, who had violated covenants that he had made with the people. Tell us a little bit about that back and forth, because there was two different trains of thought at the time of the American Revolution, wasn't it?
There were many trains of thought. In fact, we all struggled with that. If you were a man of faith, to read those verses. But as you read that, it says, for the Lord's sake. And so many of us interpreted that to say that as long as that leader is honoring God, that we are to honor them.
Mm-hmm.
But as we look at, for example, Hebrews 11, there were many honored men of faith. Jacob, Gideon, Barak, Jephthah, all of those men resisted tyrannical governments and were honored as men of faith.
Mm-hmm.
Reverend Mayhew, he said to stand against tyrants is to honor God. And that was many of the pastors, those Black Robe Regiment that served me so well throughout our glorious cause. They reminded the people that to stand for freedom is what the Lord would have us to do. But it was a struggle in many of our hearts and many of our minds through those days.
To stand against oppression, against brutality, and against the confiscation of religious liberty, because we had the British king who was imposing his own church on everyone and was basically arresting. They had a history of arresting people in England who were not part of the Church of England. They did not want to see that coming to America. They believed that was going to be something that was going to come to America. That was a key part, I believe, of the
Absolutely. Even as Jefferson was president, the Danbury Baptists wrote him a letter in concern that there was going to be a state religion or state denomination. And the separation of church and state, where those words come from, was to assure him that the government would never interfere with a person's right to their religious beliefs.
Yes.
Unfortunately, those words have been twisted, and they're being used to do exactly what they ensured that they would not do.
Yes, absolutely. Now, when it comes to political parties, we have a lot of things happening with political parties in my country. We have an election going on right now.
Yes.
You were not a fan of political parties, were you?
No, not at all. As you look at my farewell address, which there's another great concern, as we're not teaching our children the science of government, which is something that I encourage as one of the greatest endeavors that you can undertake. I said this in my farewell address, which was required memorization to graduate from high school in the early 1900s.
Really?
You had to be able to quote word for word my farewell address before you could graduate from high school.
That was quite lengthy.
Absolutely. And
all we had to do was the first half of the first paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. They didn't want you to memorize the part that when government becomes destructive of these means, it's
Yes.
the right and the duty to other people to alter or abolish
Amen.
it. Don't memorize that. Just the first part. That's all we had to do. They've dumbed it down quite a bit.
70 years ago, it was required reading.
Mm.
Now it is not even in the history textbooks anymore.
Wow.
And so I warned you, many of those things, the reason it was so important back then, they felt like, is because it was a warning to the people of this nation of the many things that we need to watch out for. And one of those, if I could quote it, I said it is a fatal tendency. Now, fatal's fairly serious.
Mm-hmm.
To put in the place of the delegated will of the nation, the will of a party. Often an artful and enterprising minority, they are likely in the course of time and things to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and usurp for themselves the reins of government, afterwards destroying the very engines that raised them to unjust dominion. That was my warning to the people of America over 200 years ago.
And we have seen the fruit of that happen as we see cunning and artful men use these political parties to seize and retain powers and to keep, once they establish their parties, to keep others from establishing competing parties, even to that degree. That's the kind of control that we have seen evolve out of that because we don't heed the warnings of George Washington. I want to ask Mr. Washington about foreign policy. We have a situation today where we are very much involved in Europe and all around the world, but that was something you had warned America about.
David, I warned you against foreign entanglements, getting entwined with these foreign governments. We paid a price. France helped us greatly, but they began to delve into our business, if you will, and it caused a lot of angst among the colonies for a long time. And so I cautioned against it. And here I see today, for example, the United Nations, I believe you call it. It's everything but, as I have observed what I've seen and heard.
Yes.
And we need to be understanding that this is a dangerous thing.
Yes.
They're entwining their beliefs, their thoughts into America. We've been one of the most blessed nations in the world, and we are slowly losing those freedoms. We're actually giving them away.
And if we were to still look at your farewell address, we would see how you had warned us that foreign interests would be combined with political parties to essentially destroy our country. And that's what we are now seeing. We see these foreign interests dictating to us not only what we're going to do with our land, but also dictating our trade and our economy. All these things are being done by foreign powers. We're being blackmailed by foreign powers. It's truly amazing when we see this. Now, I want to talk to the man who brought you here. Mark Collins. And of course, this is Mark Collins. And let me introduce him to you. Of course, he's no stranger to George Washington. He's played him in many occasions. He's been in a 10-part miniseries for the History Channel titled The Revolution. He has been at the National Day of Prayer. He has also performed at Mount Vernon, the Republican Convention, and of course in Revelation, the movie. And some amazing clips that they shot of you in Revelation, the movie. You are a Baptist pastor in, of all places, Yorktown.
Yorktown, Texas, of course.
They didn't have a Mount Vernon, Texas that you could go to?
They actually do.
Oh, they do? Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm surprised you're not there.
Be my second choice.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Now, you are exactly, and this is the interesting thing, Mark is exactly the same size as George Washington and prematurely gray. as George
Yes,
Washington.
since I was 27.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Is that right?
Yes.
That's amazing. And when you look at this picture, this split face, now this was an artist from the 18th century that we're looking at?
Haldon made a life mask, literally made a life mask of Washington's face. It's the only real image they have of Washington.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing. One of the things that Washington did and the founders did, of course, they did not divorce cause and effect from character.
Absolutely.
They did not divorce it. They understood that it flowed out from the character of the individual, which is why they would say things, as John Adams said, that unless we have a moral nation, a Christian nation, we will not be able to maintain our democracy. They understood that, and they understood they were not idealists when it came to human nature. That's why they subdivided the government. That's why they tried. The thing they were most concerned about was the consolidation of power at the federal level. They would have been absolutely horrified at the consolidation of power at the international level.
Oh, yes.
We're now seeing
Those entanglements that we just talked about.
Yes.
Yeah, it is so concerning to see what we are doing as a nation. We're giving away our nation, and it's an assault on the people of America.
Thank you so much, Mr. Collins, Mark Collins,
It is an
George
honor.
Washington. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
I do have something before we go that I would like to present to you.
Oh.
This is a picture of me at Valley Forge.
Wow.
And it has what is considered Washington's life motto, not words but deeds. And David, I feel like you and here at InfoWars, that you guys portray that better than anybody. Also, Washington created the Purple Badge of Merit for meritorious service.
Wow, the original Purple Heart.
The original Purple Heart. And so I would like to present that to you for your
The
service
replica
to this nation.
of the Purple Heart.
It's a museum quality replica of the original Purple Heart.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Best of luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Collins.
God bless.
I went to the mall last night to take my children shopping and to dinner. And all over Barton Creek Mall, all over the mall, there were women wearing complete hoods over their heads. A lot of them had scarves tied around their faces with just a slip, but I mean the full beekeeper outfits that Stefan Molyneux talks about. And there I was with my daughters, and it really felt like an assault, because these are women who in most cases aren't even allowed to drive on their own. They're trying to pass laws in Europe, the Muslims are, where women can't leave, up to 45 miles away from where they live, internal passports. In most Muslim countries, they're total slaves. It's just so crazy to know that our government's doing this on purpose, and they claim in all of Texas in last year we got 400 and something refugees, but they won't tell the governor actually how many. It's thousands in the high schools in Austin. It's thousands in the high schools. You duplicate that around the country. They've got articles even in the San Francisco Chronicle, you can look them up, where the C-130s land at the airbase and offload these people every day, and they won't say how many. Same thing in Europe.
Can we have this camera focusing on all the audience here? Can we have this camera focusing on all the audience? Because every now and then, every time we have a conference, every time we invite a speaker, they always can come with the same accusations. This speaker supports death penalty for homosexuals. This speaker supports death penalty for this crime or that. He is homophobic. They subjugate women, etc., etc., etc. It's the same old stuff coming all the time. And we always try to tell them, I always try to tell them that, look, it's not that speaker that we're inviting who has these extreme radical views, as you say. These are general views that every Muslim actually has. Every Muslim believes in these things. Just because they're not telling you about it, or just because they're not out there in the media, doesn't mean they don't believe in them. So I will ask you, everyone in the room, how many of you are normal Muslims? You're not extremists, you're not radical, just normal Sunni Muslims. Please raise your hands. Everybody, mashallah, subhanallah. Okay, take down your hands again. How many of you agree that men and women should sit separate? Please raise your hands. Everyone agree. Everyone agree. Brothers and sisters. Subhanallah. So it's not just these radical sheikhs then. Allahu Akbar. Next question. How many of you agree that the punishments described in the Quran and the Sunnah, whether it is death, whether it is stoning for adultery, whatever it is, If it is from Allah and His Messenger, that is the best punishment ever possible for humankind. And that is what we should apply in the world. Who agrees with that? Allahu Akbar. Are you all radical extremists? Subhanallah. So all of you are saying that you are common Muslims, you all go to the different masajid in Norway, or are you like a specific sect, like the Islam net sect or anything like that? Are you like that? No. Are you like that? Please raise your hand if you're like this extreme Islam net sect or anything like that. No one. Allahu Akbar. How many of you just go to these normal masajids in Norway, the normal Sunni mosques? Please raise your hands. Allahu Akbar. So what's the politicians gonna say now? What's the media gonna say now? That we're all extremists? We're all radicals? We need to deport all of us from this country? Subhanallah. Allahu Akbar. Takbir! Takbir! Takbir!
Now, joining us is Dr. Bill Warner. He was just on for his first visit with us last week from politicalislam.com. I'm not going to go over his whole bio again, but he's well-researched and been around the world. And he has been basically warning of the truth that Islam itself, in the first phase, acts nice. But once they hit 5–10%, they start attacking, and we're now seeing that with Orlando. He predicted attacks just last week, and a few days later it happened. So sorry to say you've been proven right yet again. Sir, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here, Alex. I love what you do.
Well, thank you, sir. We're just raising the alarm together here as Sentinels. We got 2 minutes till break. Your first thoughts on what's happened?
Well, it's the jihad, stupid. I mean, we're doing it once again. If you sit in my seat, one of the things you realize is it's like an endless loop film clip. And there will be a time 6 weeks from now when we won't remember this, and then wham, we'll get hit again. And then we'll go, oh. So it's my job to connect all the dots. And the reason it's easy for me to do my job is Islam has been doing the same thing for 1,400 years. What's happened in Orlando is shocking to some, but I'm afraid to say that for someone as much as myself, it's business as usual.
Let's cover a tidbit here first before we come back and get into the whole waterfront. What about this constant connection of homosexuality in Islam, but then it's closeted, but if you get caught doing it, you're executed, and pedophilia is pretty much legal, isn't it?
Well, pedophilia comes from the Sunnah of Muhammad, in which he married Aisha when she was 6 and consummated the marriage when she was 9. But homosexuality, one of the things when you're dealing with Islam is you have to precisely define your words. And when Islam speaks of homosexuality, they're talking about love. So if a man loves another man, that's wrong. But if an older man is having sex with a younger boy, this is domination or power. So it may look like homosexuality to you, but since he doesn't necessarily love the boy, it's not actually homosexuality. It's just an exercise in power.
So it's rape, it's okay.
Kind of like that.
Just God, this is just, what a freak show.
Well, I mean, like I say, we just have to, every time we deal with Islam, we need to define our words carefully because Islam always has its own private hidden meanings.
Well, let's decode that and what you expect to come next with our guest straight ahead. This is just insane. Is it Stockholm Syndrome, or why is the left so allied with these people, sir?
Well, you know, it's not just the left. I find that there are people here in Nashville, Tennessee, who would normally consider themselves conservatives in many matters, but they don't want to engage Islam. And the reason is, if you do engage Islam and say anything about it, you're called a racist, hater, bigot, Islamophobe.
So it's cowardice. It's cowardice.
Yes, that's it. You know, we've gotten as a nation a little too rich. Now, when I tell people that, they're horrified that you could ever be too rich. And in a strange way, we've become to where we don't want to tend to anything except ourselves. And now that we're under a civilizational attack, and as a result, we've gone complacent. We want to hire professionals to do our work for us. If the military can do it, fine. Law enforcement can do it, fine. But if there's work here, we've got to do ourselves. As a civilization, we have to acquaint ourselves with what's attacking us. And this is an information war. It's the reason I love the title of your show. This is not a war we're going to win with bullets and bombs, but it's a war of ideas. We have to understand that this is a very serious piece of business. We have an enemy. The enemy is political Islam, and it's here to take over our civilization.
Breaking down the latest attack, what jumps out for you?
Well, the thing that doesn't jump out with me, as I say, is this just one more attack? Right now we're excited about this, but there will come a time in which we won't be excited about this and we'll go back to sleep. It's like every time an event like this happens, we come up to here and then the awareness starts going down, then it'll come back up. So to me, this is all a matter of business as usual. I guess I've become inured to it. I'm like a triage surgeon. It's just another event. What happens is that there's a degradation of civilization. There's a wonderful word called dhimmi, D-H-I-M-M-I, and it's the dhimmi status which is the dhimmi lives within the Sharia law context, but continues to have their own private life. And so that's what we have here is a form of dhimmitude in which the Sharia is being pressed on us more and more. We're not supposed to criticize Muhammad. We're not supposed to tell a Muhammad joke. And yet what we find is that dhimmi has something he is degraded. And how is he degraded? Well, he's no longer in charge of the society he lives in. And that's sort of what's happening here is more and more we feel less and less in control of what's going on. Alex, there are things that are happening now that you would never have believed that would happen. I mean, you can't predict all these things.
But I find it fascinating, the point that once they get to be a certain percentage of population, they almost make us pay a tax and submit then, even though we're not Muslims, is what you're saying?
What the problem with Islam is it's not just a religion. If Islam were just a religion, I wouldn't be here talking to you. I would be in my wood shop making another piece of furniture, which is where I was on 9/11. So the problem is it's a political system, and that's what I concern ourselves with. But by the way, understanding that Islam is a political system is the key to defeating Islam. You know, as a religion, you get protection in our society. And I coined the term political Islam the day after the 9/11 attacks because I realized that we would never defeat a religion because there's too much religious protection in this country. But we can defeat a political system. So I coined the term political Islam because that's the part that concerns you and me. I'm not involved in the religion of Islam, and I don't care about the religion of Islam one way or the other. They pray 5 times a day. I don't care. It doesn't have any impact on me. But, oh, by the way, let me use prayer here as an illustration of the difference between political Islam and religious Islam. More in Europe, it happens a lot, but now it's beginning to happen in the United States, where on a Friday, Muslims will commandeer the streets in order to pray. You may have seen pictures of this in New York. Now then, you say, well, that's your religious right. Stop and look at what's happening here. The religious part is the prayer, but when you commandeer the street, that is a political action. Alex, if I go out here in my neighborhood and commandeer the street, I'm going to meet some people who with blue lights on their car, and they're not going to have a very good attitude about me. It is illegal to block traffic unless you're a Muslim, and then all of a sudden that political action gets the guise of a religious covering. So it's politics that we care about, and it's what we need to do to defeat Islam is we have to accept it.
So it's all definitions, and you talk about how they have like gang language, they have code words that we don't understand. Break some examples of that down, Doctor.
Oh, let's see. How about innocent? It frequently happens that after a killing, they will say, oh, well, Islam forbids the killing of innocents. Well, it does. But you see, I am guilty. I am not innocent. And I bet you're guilty too. What are you guilty of, Alex? You're guilty of denying the prophethood of Muhammad and the perfection of the Quran. So that's the problem, is that we have special words that have special meaning. And that, like I say, innocent is just the same one that comes up all the time.
But it's okay if you're not an innocent. So they're saying, oh, we're against killing innocent, knowing that that's basically a code word, but they're saying, but you're not innocent.
That's exactly correct. As a matter of fact, it goes further than this. It's they'll also, they haven't drugged this out on this event. By the way, have you noticed that there's always the same denials after a jihad event? It's like, well, now we don't want to be blaming Muslims. You know, Islam is a religion of peace. And I know this Muslim, he's a wonderful person. And if we criticize Muslims, that's Muslim bashing. So have you noticed this again and again quality of what everyone drags out?
Well, the quote top imam there in Florida came out and said, do not make this political and turn it into an event to lecture everyone.
Well, you know, I preach just the opposite doctrine. Not interested in the lecturing, but I'm interested in people learning. That's the reason I'm interested in being on your show. This is an information war. If we would ever accept that, then we could win this war. And if it's an information war, this means that everybody has to partake in it. For instance, the religious leaders need to start partaking in this war and stand up for what is a political action is that Christians are being killed in Africa and the Middle East on a daily basis. Those are political actions. And we need to get people who first understand the fact that it's going on. And the other thing is we need to get religious leaders involved in opposing this. So it's a civilizational war, and we need to bring everybody in on the act.
What about Islamic espionage? They're buying the politicians off. Saudi Arabia alone funds 20% of Hillary's campaign.
You know, Islam is very big on, there are 4 kinds of jihad. There's jihad of the sword, which is what we all heard here. Then there's jihad of speech, jihad of writing, and there's jihad of money. As a matter of fact, the Quran goes on again and again and says that every Muslim must contribute money towards jihad. And by the way, contributing money towards jihad gives you the same blessing as if you had committed the act of jihad itself. So Saudi Arabia spends more money on implementing Wahhabism around the world than communists did at the height of the Cold War. So and Muhammad, by the way, it's clearly written, would use money in order to influence both politics and religion. So the fact that Islam is using money is also part of the fact that they understand civilizational war. I am a strange admirer of the Islamic concepts of war because they're so total. I argue that Muhammad was the greatest warrior who ever lived. Alex, nobody dies today for Alexander the Great, Caesar, or Napoleon, but someone died today because of Muhammad's military leadership. So money is simply part of a civilizational jihad, just like immigration is part of a civilizational jihad. Islam has the most brilliant concepts of war that I've ever read. It uses everything. I just told you earlier how praying in the street becomes a political action and part of a political war. By the way, this goes on long enough until finally it just becomes the way that people do business. And they just say, well, it's Muslims, they can do what they want to do. So Islam understands war and understands it involves money. You look like you're old enough to understand that some people you can't buy, but you can definitely rent. It's hard to find someone that money doesn't influence. But I'm shocked that you think that money would influence Hillary's political position, really.
It is amazing. Do you think every time there's an attack, people are getting more concerned about Islam, or do you think they're starting to go to sleep and get that fatigue from it?
I think that we're winning on the basis of, Alex, if there were only jihad of speech, writing, and money, we would lose this. We wouldn't stand a chance. The only thing that happens is after every jihad event that hits the news, let's be clear here, it is a rare jihad event that comes into the news. It has to be big. But when it does, all of a sudden people are learning because they have their face shoved into it. Alex, we're beginning to win at this is going to sound strange, but we're beginning to win at one level of the information war, which is we now dominate the comment section. No matter how liberal the newspaper may be, if they offer comments, we find that our word is getting in and being heard. So it's sort of shock learning. And
the public's learning the nomenclature. They're learning the Islamic terms. They're learning that this has all been hidden from us.
Well, people are learning in general. For instance, people now understand that there is such a thing as political Islam, that it's not just religion. So I'm optimistic on this point. Our problem is not at the grassroots level, Alex. Our problem is at the top. We're betrayed at the top. The elites are selling us down the road. And it's not just on Islam, by the way. I go to Europe twice a year, and the EU has become an organization of elites that's slowly destroying nations.
Oh, absolutely. No, I mean, they're globalists, and that's why they've opened the door up for the Islamicists to come in. Why is the EU allied with the Islamicists?
This is very strange to me. However, its roots are in oil. I was reading a book on one of the master spies before the First World War, and something very interesting happened. And that was that the British, who had dominated the world by the use of ships, had fueled their ships with coal. Then it became very clear that the future of naval warfare lay in oil. It was at this point that scholarship at Oxford and Cambridge and other university studies, other sites, began to view Islam in a more and more favorable light. Before 1920, there were some great books written by university scholars about Islam. But after the need for oil came about, all of a sudden, Britain became more and more compliant and more.
That's right. And the British Empire basically set up these current states, so thought it controlled it, made a deal with it, and now it's infiltrated the global imperial model. We're not under a British Empire, but the British model is still kind of the Anglo-American global government system. That's now caught the Islamic virus, and that's how it's replicating and taking over.
It is. And you know, what's really terrible about all this is everybody who's involved in accommodating ourselves to Islam view themselves as nice people. I've met people who oppose me in my politics, and their motivation is good. That is, from their limited point of view.
They think being nice and be friendly and don't be hateful.
You know what I would like to talk about next is I heard part, I didn't hear it, I read it. Trump's calling out, I think he calls it radical or extreme Islam. This is the wrong term to use. It's very common. It's used by a lot of people. And a friend said to me in a conversation that Obama was rattling Trump's cage because of calling it extreme Islam or radical Islam. Now, I disagree with Trump and I disagree with Obama. What we have here, there are two forms of Islam. One of the key things about learning about Islam is to understand it's dualistic. It always has two manifestations. A 20-second summary. Muhammad preached the religion of Islam for 13 years in Mecca and persuaded 150 Arabs to become Muslims. He moved to Medina. He migrated. That began the process of jihad in politics. He had 100 events of jihad in the last 9 years of his life, and when he died, every Arab in Central Arabia was a Muslim. Here's what the lesson to take home from this is. There are two forms of Islam, a religious Islam and then a political Islam, which includes jihad. So what we should say is that it's not extreme Islam, because if you're doing what Muhammad did, how can you be extreme? No, it is Medinan Islam, or jihad form of Islam. So that we need to start using the precise words. We need to make our own words and use them. Because if what you may view as 9/11 as something extreme, that's on the basis of your ethical system and your system of life. If you're doing what Muhammad did, it cannot be extreme. It cannot be radical. It is normative and normal. So we need to learn to start using the right word.
Sure, and understand why that 99% of terrorism worldwide is from Islamicists, and then why is our government defending it? It's just crazy. It's absolutely over the top.
You know, Alex, you keep trying to ask me these questions as though I'm going to be able to make sense out of them all. But I cannot explain why women who are otherwise good people will sit there and go to an interfaith gathering and hear women talk about how wonderful that Islam was the first to give women their rights, that Islam protects women. Islam, so listen to all these things that Islam is supposed to be good for women, and just sit there and like baby birds, when the mother bird feeds them, they drop the worm down the mouth.
Meanwhile, ISIS is selling 6-year-olds into sex slavery and gets Saudi Arabian approval. I'm going to throw up.
You know, you're reaching the point where I'm going to teach you a phrase which the professionals in my business use. I mean, I deal with professionals around the world, and occasionally we all just shake our heads and go, we can't make this up. I mean, how would you do this? Islam is, when you enter the world of Islam, you enter a world in which everything has two meanings and everything is upside down. And everything you think you know, it's the opposite of that. It's like Islam is permanent opposite day. You know, we're laughing here, and yet the truth of the matter is Islam is the enemy of the liberal, the conservative, the progressive, the left.
I think it's the enemy of itself. My God, who wants to live under the way those countries are? I feel sorry for the Muslims trying to flee to get away from it. I guess they'd be called heretics from Islam. Dr. Bill Warner, have a great week coming up. Thank you for joining us. Boy, spot on with his warnings. We have sources in Washington. We have sources in the Pentagon that are trusted and that are patriots. Sources that have helped expose the fact that Obama, through the Muslim Brotherhood, as well as with Hillary, has been aiding and abetting al-Qaeda, now known as Islamic State, to confuse the public. Infowars.com has been at the very forefront of breaking this dangerous information the last 4+ years. And, of course, Cy Hirsch came on earlier this year to thank the broadcast and to concur with our sources and analysis that the Pentagon, namely the Army, for 4 years had been telling Obama, we are not going to aid al-Qaeda / ISIS. We are not going to be their Air Force. and that the Pentagon began feeding intelligence to the Russians, who were already on the ground there, by the way, to stop the Islamic State takeover. Islamic State was allied heavily, of course, and financed by Saudi Arabia, its progenitor, its main backer. NATO, of course, has been backing it. We have the leftist in Europe, Hollande, Merkel backing it heavily. They planned the entire destabilization program starting in Libya. Then it was to move to the east, to its neighbor, Egypt, and then right through up into Turkey, and then into the rest of Europe. They had the UN project headed up by the EU founder, Peter Sutherland, advertised going back 4 years ago that refugees should come to Europe, made the preparations for that, and then had them en masse come in as a time bomb that Saudi Arabia and the leftists can activate anytime they want through the Saudi Arabian command to engage in massive terror attacks all over Europe and the United States. This is being used to hold the West hostage, certain segments of the globalist combine believe. It is an insane, over-the-top, bold move, especially when you know that it was at least a 5 to 6 year old plan, and that when the Pentagon broke with the plan, when they discovered it and stopped playing along with it, they still went ahead with the program to fill Europe and the United States with the jihad forces masked as refugees, 80% military-age men. So they're putting their sleeper cells in place right now. They are massing them right now, but because they are not directed, they are, to use my allegory, it's like fire ants climb up your leg, and then when they get in a certain mass, one of them releases a pheromone saying, I'm about to sting, and then all of them instantaneously, within a millisecond, start stinging. That pheromone is released so fast, their antennas pick it up, smell it. That's what their antennas do, is basically smell. That's their noses. And boom, they hit you. And that's how this works. And I can look at the metrics, talking to top terrorism experts on and off air. We're going to see terror attacks increase at an exponential rate. And so that's what's been happening. They've been doubling every year worldwide for the last 5 years since this electronic jihad began and then kicked off the Arab Spring, run by Google, the White House, NATO, the globalist. I mean, this is a real move. This is happening. But some of the fire ants are firing too early because they're not under command and control. The globalists breed them in their basement like black widows, as I've said many times, dump them into our political homes, dump them into our beds, and then they know the black widows are going to bite us. But they're not in full control of them. They've just released them. Or it's like putting rattlesnakes in somebody's bed or water moccasins in somebody's swimming pool. This has been done, and thank God they are not well organized and ever well directed. You certainly can't say that Muslim Arab men are cowards. No, they're not. They're not cowards. On average, I mean, they're willing to die. They do hit cowardly targets. But they certainly are uncoordinated in their historical behaviors and activities for whatever reason.
So here we have these 3 red pins. That represents Syrian population. Here's where they're migrating to get to Europe. They're coming from all the way down here, all the way up to Germany. They're coming up through Africa. They're going through Spain, going to Norway and Sweden. And let's go over to America, because that's where the refugees are going to end up at the end. Hundreds of thousands of them. And basically no state is left unscathed. So here we have the 18 cities. These are the 18 Democratic mayors that wrote a letter to Obama stating that they would love to have more refugees than what they're already getting. And here are the number of locations where all these Syrian refugees are going to go. They're going to pop up and start up their own, like, instant community in all these locations right here that I've listed here on Google Maps. There's roughly over 300 of them. I think there's like 362. I mean, these are just simply the refugee processing centers. So they're going to spread them out all over America. It's going to be like a mass seeding of Islam throughout America. And all it's going to do is accelerate this process that the OIC started back in 1963. And it's just a plan to basically take over our country.
It's Tuesday, June 14th, 2016. 14 days ago, Tim Kennedy, Special Forces soldier, patriot, was here warning us of imminent jihad attacks inside of the United States. And just 12 days later, his warning came true.
Political correctness these days are getting people killed. Europe might be lost because of their tolerance. Tolerance and political correctness, they go hand in hand. You know, they're two diseases. They're like a virus that is, like, once it's caught, you just want to stay with it, but slowly it's eroding and killing you. You're gonna die. That's the thing about the truth and political correctness. They can't coexist. You either have what's true and what's right, or then you have what's socially acceptable. Those two things are exclusive. They can't live together. Believe in the truth, live in the truth, speak the truth. Just get rid of the political correctness.
If I was just gonna like attach an idea to it, it's gonna be dangerous freedom.
I believe in dangerous freedom. I'll take dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery any day. The reason that I believe that is any other form of this construct of freedom can't materialize. It can't ever be substantial without risk. You know, the part about being a libertarian, the part about being and understanding what individual responsibility means, there is some assumed risk that goes along with it. That's knowing that the government can't take care of me all the time. That's knowing that the government's not going to give me a free cell phone. That's knowing that the government is not going to give me food when I'm hungry. That's knowing that I have to take care of myself and my family. I believe in freedom. I believe that I should be able to say whatever I want, whenever I want, when it doesn't hurt somebody else. I believe in freedom of religion. I believe that there should be procedures when the government's going to come and search my home or want to get in my car. There's a reason that we had all these, the Constitution and every one of those wonderful amendments. The only way that every single one of them can exist is because of the Second Amendment. You like freedom of speech? Well, you better like your right to bear arms, because you can't have one without the other. It was written for the government. It was written so that the people always have more power than the government. Now that preponderance has shifted. It has gone from the people being the ones that have the power to now we're scared of the government. We have to go back to a dangerous freedom. That's where people have more power than the government. That is people having guns. That is people having better guns than the government. Yeah, it's scary. But last time we had somebody cruise into San Bernardino into a gun-free zone, 2 people, a couple of guns, killed countless. You know what happened last time 2 people came into Texas to try to do the same thing? They didn't even make it out of their car. That's the difference. Dangerous freedom, we understand what the risk is. There's an assumption there. And I'll take that dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery any day.